Hello, all. May the Yetis of the Southern Alps call to you like Cable Vanderwerf performing the Barking Spider. So that aside, I have some cancer life dates, but I'm going to sprinkle them in the order that I discovered them, so you'll have to read the whole life demo to find them. I know. I'm a shrewd businessman. Anyway, after finishing the last live demo, I called with Ollie from New Zealand as we planned to catch up. But shortly after the call began, Mom brought home sushi for family dinner. Thus, I had to bail to consume said sushi with the family. Nevertheless, I got sushi out of the deal, so that was pretty great. I then waited for Grace to finish writing an essay that she had for homework, which took surprisingly long before we all sat down and ate said sushi while watching Ichijo. Once that finished, I talked with William, the great Varley, about some philosophy stuff, and then I met Joe at Southgate, wherein we obtained the privilege of awkwardly standing around while youth group ended. But soon that privilege was taken from me, and drove me to his house, where we both made a garbage AMV that hurts my soul to even think about. It was really bad. We did, however, make a Violet Evergarden satire, which was intentionally bad, and that made it good. But I'm not going to lie, it kind of felt like I was breaking a cathedral window. Violet Evergarden is basically sacred to me at this point, and to see it made fun of like that was painful, but I have to admit it was well done sacrilege. So yeah, both profound and ashamed of what I helped create. I went home and slept. The following morning, I woke up early and did quiet time, and then responded to people, did Funime, listened to Majesty of Reason while gathering clips from Akabe's. From there, I spoke with the great Vali before having a big brain moment and writing it all down in the docs. I then went to Nichijou. I then watched Nichijou with Grace and Divergent with Ben, and from there proceeded to teach my philosophy class, and everyone took a big quiz, which they all aced. Then, however, because we were done fairly early, I was like, here's how it all ties together. And you could just see all of it click, and it was fantastic. Again, the joys of being a teacher are so much greater than anticipated. Then I just went home, did Funime, and slept. The next morning, I had surgery for my port, and honestly, I wasn't that nervous. It was general anesthesia again, but this time I actually don't remember, feeling anything. Before I can recall the spicy, fuzzy sensation and all the moments right up before being knocked out, but this time there's just, nothing. Which I suppose is in some way more concerning, as it seems I experienced, a loss of memory of some sort. But I don't know, maybe your body's just, more prepared for anesthesia the second time. Whatever the case, the thing is, my chest, which now feels really weird, by the way, has a thing in it, which is very much proof that I have had surgery, even if I don't remember it. They didn't give me any narcotics the second time around and just told me to take Advil, so this one hurt much more than the biopsy, but honestly, it wasn't that bad. Still, the port has been super sensitive. I actually let a soccer ball hit it while I was just messing around, and man, that was some very intense pain. Also, Mrs. James gave me an assassination hug, e.g. an unanticipated and, in this case, quite painful hug from behind, and she hugged my port, which was also not a fun experience. I honestly do not understand why it hurts so bad, but it just does. It's like the port pushes up directly against your nerves or something. Anyway, here's 2 pictures of me right before my surgery. Picture. Ignoring the quality of my expression in that photo, they did make me take off a New Zealand necklace for the surgery, which was a bit sad. I got it reattached afterward, but still, the legacy was broken. After surgery, Mom got lost when she was supposed to pick me up, which was awkward, mostly because the nurse controlling my wheelchair was really bad at small talk. But then, once Mom found us 15 minutes later, I was able to escape into the car and achieve reprieve. From there, I watched some anime, ate food, read some philosophy, and started working on AMV, and then I played Minecraft with Ollie until we finally didn't fail the minigame we were playing, which I will be the first to admit was 100% my fault because I comparatively suck at Minecraft. Then the rest of the night, I spent working on that AMV, and I must dare say, it's probably my favorite yet. It's all from one anime, and honestly, I think it did really well. The next day, I woke up earlier than I wanted. Once I was up, I then got... But once I was up, and thus I got up. I then studied philosophy for a while, took a walk around campus, came back, finished watching Blue Lock with Mom. That show really is fantastic. Also, Dad bought me a shirt from it. Check it out. Boop. We'll see how good it looks when it actually gets here, but Shigure is probably my favorite character because we're similar, so I have to have a cool shirt of him. I then had the bi-yearly good conversation with Ben, which always seems to happen, and somehow, I don't know why we do that. And then I talked with Caleb as he came over. From there, I hopped in Caleb's car, and we went and got canes and caught up. Caleb is one of those people where, even if you haven't talked or hung out with him in ages, you're still pretty tight when you see each other again. I don't quite understand why he's like that, but he is. So yeah, I did that. It was good to catch up some. I then got home and spent the rest of the night finishing Toby's dumb philosophy paper. Actually so vexing. The next morning I went to church, but Ben, Sam, and Seth weren't around as they were helping Jake move, so instead we did some magic. I then drove over to Joe and saw Jake and Charity's new place briefly, and then we just drove back. I decided I was going to quit pain meds that day, so my port was definitely causing me some pain that whole time, which I will say made the whole experience less enjoyable. Anyway, after drove me back, I went over to Neo and Cities where D&D was scheduled to happen. That day we kind of played D&D, but we also kind of didn't. It was more pseudo D&D. I don't recall it being particularly bad. I just remember being significantly distracted. Whatever the case, did that, and then Neo, John, Alan, and I discussed one of my concerns for the commune, namely how disagreement would be resolved. And John and Neo seemed to think there wouldn't be any deep-seated arguments or disagreements. They could just, talk through it. But I think that's super naive and also just plain false. Still, I wasn't able to convince them of the high likelihood of that, so I guess we'll just wait and see what happens with that. The whole commune is still currently a pipe dream, so if it actually gets to the point where people are like really serious, then I'll bring up my concerns in earnest. Anyway, Sydney gave us good food. That was nice. From there, we decided it would be good to watch a movie, and so I was like, oh, I got you. And I busted out not Mantequilla, Maquia, which is my second favorite anime movie. But to my surprise and dismay, both Neo and Alan were like, They didn't think it was bad, don't get me wrong. Both of their reactions were nevertheless kind of like disproportionate to the objective greatness of the movie. It's a really good movie, even if they don't acknowledge it. Thus, after wasting beauty on them, I then went home. From there, I decided to go on a night walk, which was big nice, and then I did some funime before going to sleep. The next morning, I walked over to CSU and caught up with Noah Myers over a Subway sandwich, which is, a pretty average conversation. But he's changed in some pretty noticeable ways, so that's interesting to hear, especially his perspective on that change. Also, I leaned back in one of the chairs and legit snapped in half. Like, all four legs became detached from the seat, and it was very broken. I caught myself just fine, but it was deeply embarrassing as everyone's gaze snapped to me. Anyway, chair snapping aside, I had a very good conversation with Noah. From there, I went home and played some more of Moss 2 on the VR headset until it was time to leave for Joe's house. Neo and I decided to go over early because the idea was Joe would teach Neo Thomistic metaphysics and I would evaluate him on how well he could explain it. But then when we got there, Joe's brain was dead and he did horribly, so basically he holistically failed. And I mean, I understand that I didn't teach Thomism systematically, but clearly he had no idea how it all tied together. So that wasn't at all. Oh, that wasn't all that was done during that time, though. Neo also graciously prepared me food. See, due to my PET scan the following morning, I couldn't eat any carbs, so food was basically just a lot of very strongly flavored meat. So even if Joe failed, Neo succeeded, and I was well fed. And yeah, for the rest of the night, we spent playing D&D and just talking. The session went well, and the conversation afterward was mildly interesting, and it was a good way to end the night. Now, for less mundane stuff. The next morning, I awoke and drove myself to the PET scan place, which they surprisingly had just like a house, which they turned into a PET scan place. And there was like a big MRI machine in one of the normal rooms. After filling out a ton of paperwork, they then took me back and sat me in the chair while they obtained the radioactive sugar. Now, I don't have any pictures of this, but I wish I could, because first off, it was classic radioactive symbol on all the doors and the containers and stuff, so that was pretty cool. Since I've never actually seen that symbol sincerely used in real life before. The more significant thing, though, was that the syringe containers were like these massive cubes of metal. I don't know how they even move those things. But yeah, once you took the serum out of the metal cube, it had this inch-thick lead sheath that was in, and you're like, this is going inside me. And the answer was very much yes. Honestly, as I put stuff in my veins, I started to feel very faint. I've never really felt faint before when people take my blood and put it back in because plasma. But this time, I definitely felt very lightheaded. My body was like, hold up, this stuff in particular should not go in here. Or maybe it was just because I watched the process very intently and I was intrigued. Whatever the reason, though, I did not feel great, so that was interesting. Anyway, after putting the radioactive stuff for me, they were like, go sit in the chair while it spreads. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so that's what I did. I watched some anime and honestly felt pretty normal. Then they came in and brought me to the MRI machine where I laid down and the scanning began. Honestly, there wasn't all that much that was notable about the process. When I first slid into the tube, I felt all the hairs on my body kind of stand on end as, they rolled me in. And that was kind of weird. Other than that, the machine was quite close to my face. And I'm not claustrophobic, though, so I don't really mind that. They had me raise my arms above my head for 20 minutes, and my arms totally fell asleep, so that was vexing. But that's about it. Overall, pretty uneventful. Now, I'm going to share the images they took and explain what they mean. I would like to be noted that I correctly predicted my stage based on the images, which, not actually impressive, just proves that medical things aren't as complicated as they seem. All right, let me explain how this works. See, the radioactive stuff is actually sugar, and the reason why that's relevant, well, mostly, though, is because most, not all, cancer cells really like to slurp sugar at a rate disproportionately high to the rest of your body. It's called the Warburg effect, for something like that. I don't really care enough to look it up. Anyway, the point is, by watching where the radioactive sugar goes, you can figure out where the cancer is and how far it's spread. Okay, with that explained, here's some of the relevant pictures they took of me. Picture. So the first picture shows the black areas in which there's a high sugar consumption. See that amorphous blob between my lungs and my chest area? Yeah, that's my lymph nodes being like, cancer's fun! So apparently I have had an approximately baseball-sized tumor right there, and 3 other golf ball-sized or marble-sized corrupt lymph nodes all packed in there as well, e.g. a lot of cancer. So likely that's where it all started, and then it spread to my armpit. See the little 2 dots on the left side of the picture? And my neck. Hard to see, but there's a spot on my neck that's darker too. The second picture just highlights in red and in more detail the cancerous mass between my lungs. So yeah, that's what it all means, as things are definitely a lot worse than I hoped. See, I thought I was in stage 1, maybe early to stage 2, but it turns out I'm actually in late stage 2, aka stage 2 unfavorable. That classification is due to the fact that the cancer has both spread through more remote lymph node sites, aka my chest and armpit, and also because it's a big boy, aka bulky disease. So yeah, I'm significantly worse off than I would have been if I was in stage 1. But still, the news isn't all bad. The cancer isn't spread to my groin area, which is a big good, and it's not in any of my vital organs or bones, as far as we can tell, which are both very bueno things. As for my odds of survival in 5 years, on average, the survival of people with classic stage 2 unfavorable Hodgkin's lymphoma is around 83%-ish. Now, mine are arguably higher than that because I'm young and healthy, but, something you need to understand is the reason those things make my odds higher isn't because the treatment is more effective for young and healthy people, but rather young and healthy people can take more intense treatment. E.g., your odds of going up, living go up because they can poison you more before, you die. While an old person, they couldn't poison you as much where you would die. So, yeah, being young and healthy means I can take more of the chemo just before it kills me, or, significantly decreases my quality of life. Anyway, from that, I gather my odds in particular sit somewhere around 90% for a 5-year survival rate. So, still good, but, not necessarily comforting. So, yeah, that's the official diagnosis. The really rough bit is it means I'm guaranteed to be on chemo for the next 6 months, so that super sucks. They give me another PET scan after 2 months to see how well the chemo is working, and then from there, either scale it up or scale it back. But either way, it's 6 months of death. Also, there's another really big thing. Aside from all the nasty symptoms I can look forward to in experiencing chemotherapy, I'm going to be significantly immunocompromised. So for me, that means COVID all over again, except I'm the only one in quarantine. So yeah, for those of you around me, usually I wouldn't care, but for this next extended season, I really need to know if you are sick, because literally all my neutrophils are going to die, and I just can't fight back. I'll probably make it a policy to wear an N95 just whenever I'm around people. However, on a tangent note, I was thinking of it, and I think it'd be pretty cool to turn my mask into a ninja mask. Mix it up. So if any of you have cool ideas to make a M95 look sick, then let me know. But yeah, that's what I know, and that's what the plan is. Upon discovering all that, I will say I did crack a letter, just because that's not particularly pleasant future to look forward to. So if any of you haven't written me letters yet, yeah, now would be a good time to send them, because I have chemo, and once it starts, it definitely looks like I'm going to need them. But yeah, anyway, who's to say, right? We'll have to see how I feel come Friday. Oh, I forgot to mention, I start chemo Friday. From then on, I'll get a new dose every Friday bi-weekly. One thing that's really nasty about chemo is it compounds on itself, so it's going to be worse each time they dose me. Or so I've heard. So yeah, prayers for that lovely experience. Still, I'm getting hit on Friday, it seems pretty likely I'll be missing church, D&D, and maybe Monday nights every other week. I'm not sure this will be the case. I'm just giving you all a heads up because that seems likely. But again, we'll have to see come Friday. Now, to get back to the timeline, I finished my PET scan and drove home. It was this time that I officially was banned from giving people hugs for an hour because my body was still radioactive. Best ban ever. And then, once that wore off, my life returned to normal. I met up with Toby, and we went on a walk while talking philosophy. Once we got some boba at Ding Tea, and yeah, basically discussed his paper. I feel like the conversation was more well-measured than our previous one, meaning I feel like he heard me out more, but I also feel like he didn't really address my concerns. Regardless, it was an okay conversation. Immediately after, I joined the family for a "While Alex Still Has Hair" family photo shoot, and it was painful, but not as bad as it could have been. Once I finished, I got home just in time for Ratio, and I went to Ratio. However, once I arrived, I discovered it was a Q&A night, the most painful of all Ratio events, and hence after eating my pizza, I left. Yet as I was leaving, Ethan pulled me aside and wanted to talk, so I didn't actually leave just then. Remember that time a while back when Ethan, butted into the conversation me and Toby were having, while not significantly saying anything whatsoever? Well, apparently, my opinion as regards his interjection showed, and he felt like I was ignoring him, which is accurate, because I was. And that irked him. Honestly, I still think I handled the situation well. I wasn't rude. I didn't tell him to leave or anything. I just quietly, sat there while he rambled on and on. And once he finished, I brought the conversation back to what we were talking about before he interrupted. But regardless, he figured I had beef with him, so we sat down for an hour and talked over. And I think, I was able to clear things up. I made it clear I don't think he's philosophically smart. I mean, sure, he's smarter than the average person, but not on the world scale. And he's certainly not my intellectual peer when it comes to philosophy. But regardless, I also made it clear that I didn't have any issue with him whatsoever. And also that I still thought he was a very good and valuable human, even if he doesn't excel in philosophy, according to my metrics. And further, I genuinely did respect that he was willing to pull me aside and talk through this. Most people are way too conflict averse to do that. So far, his character just, seems pretty solid to me. So yeah, I think the conversation went well, and things were resolved, and I'm glad he pulled me aside. Once I got home, I proceeded to play more of Moss 2 until Joe, Neo, and Sydney finished their discussions of Ratio and decided to come over to the Bioscott engineering building to playtest Neo and Mai's alternative magic mode, which we're calling Magic the Conquest. Essentially, we've combined Magic and Catan, and I'm not going to lie, it works pretty well. I was pretty surprised to see how well the system worked for the first playtest. So yeah, we played that until 12:30, at which point I was like, guys, I've got to sleep. So we ended that before the game did. And as you might expect, when I got home, I went to sleep. The next day I woke to Ben driving over at my house and just chilled and did his own thing, beside for most of the day. I find it strange how just having someone else around is enjoyable, but it really is. I start off the morning with quiet time, and then I have a doctor's appointment, which Al enjoyed me for, where they officially told me I was stage 2 unfavorable, but I already figured that out, so that didn't really come as a surprise. Then I came home, grabbed Five Guys with Ben, and we watched some more of our anime that we've been working through very slowly, after which Morgan came over for our pre-planned talk, and we did that. That walk was great. The temperature was just beautiful, the fall colors were fantastic. See, there's been 2 weeks of fall, and the trees have leaves, there's 2 weeks of fall where the trees have leaves and everything, and it's just super beautiful. And somehow I always forget that brief time of pure beauty. Usually I remember fall as this desolate, pre-snow landscape, which to be fair is what fall is most of the time. But still, for at least like 2 weeks, fall I think is my favorite season. So yeah, Morgan and I enjoyed a brisk walk, and we talked about a good number of things, and it was an interesting conversation. I think Morgan and I are going to make a more consolidated effort to hang out once again, because we haven't seen each other in ages, and both of us agreed that was a bit tragic. Anyway, we made it back. It was good, and hopefully it will happen bi-weekly from now on. From there, Johanna, Ben, Grace, Karina, Joe, and I all planned on doing a lengthy night rollerblade, since I won't be able to do stuff like that again really soon. And so with a bit of lateness / scheduling issues, we made it to Springfield Cannon Park and began our journey into the night. However, after traveling like a mile, Joe just collapsed on the ground dying, and so he and Karina ended up turning around and going back, which was a bit sad. Not quite sure why Joe died, but we think he might have been sick. Whatever the case, we moved on without significant pity for his plight and continued our trek. Now see, something you have to note about this particular night rollerblading journey is that I had never gone these trails before. I had driven past parts of them on my way to church and stuff, but I never actually traveled them. And the one thing that made them really cool was they snaked through this like wilderness area with some pretty non-trivial hills. But see, it was dark, so we couldn't see if / where the hill ended. So kind of stupidly, we're just like, well, YOLO! And we just yeeted ourselves down the hills. I will tell you, it was quite the adrenaline rush, just to keep going faster and faster and faster. You didn't know if you were going to like take a sharp turn or if there was going to be like a nice gentle slope to slow you down. Yeah. You only had the light of the moon, and so frankly, you had no idea what was coming most of the time, but that made it a ton of fun. That part was just a really good time. And from there was a few moments that was like, this better work out, because I actually can't stop. And most of the time, like, zipping super fast through the dark was just a total blast. Once we got through the wilderness area, the trail became a lot more mild, and we kept, just the pace. We maneuvered our way through Fort Collins quite some time, and that part was pretty uneventful. However, there was this one homeless guy that started approaching us, asking us to kill him. So yeah, that was a bit weird. But other than that, it was largely uneventful. Eventually, we made it all the way back to where we started, though we did have to slow down for Grace at one point in time. And once we made it back to the cars, we just laid on the cool sidewalk, feeling accomplished and having, spent an evening well. We rode about 14 miles in all, and here's a picture of the route we traveled. From there, we decided to come back to my house, where chili was eaten and anime watched, until Ben and Johanna had to go to bed. Once they left, I just did a few little things before going to sleep myself. The next morning, I woke up at 7 in the morning, which, before I say anything else, that time needs to be highlighted because I never wake up at 7. That's way too early. But this time was a special case, as when I woke up, I had some mega big brain moments where a bunch of things all fell into place, and it made sense regarding the nature of, media making and my particular situation. Hence, for the next 3 hours, I wrote down those big brain thoughts, and it was great. Once I finally finished doing that, I did Funime and proceeded to chat with Johanna over Discord, and we had the "this is not a romance" conversation, which I have with all my girl space friends. I believe that it was John that corrected me in saying girl, friends, because that's what I used to say, as that's an improper designation, as it implies the girls and friends are separate. But the girl space friends indicates no such separation, while nevertheless emphasizing that the person who is a friend is a girl, not a girlfriend. Hence, I have adopted this modified designator. As always, it was a little bit awkward, but I've made it standard practice to have it with basically every girl I become friends with, and it makes things so much easier down the road. Plus, Johanna and I are going to spend a lot of time together, since we both now have minimal lives, and more importantly, have discovered we enjoy doing a lot of the same things, and thus, it was important to have that conversation. But overall, she handled it well, and the conversation went smoothly, so that was good. From there, I went to my doctor's appointment and discovered all the bad things were going to happen to me during my chemo, which was a blast. And then they took me to the infusion room where the infusion room to show me around, and that just oozed depression. I had just stepped in there, and man, everyone was not happy. There was a tangible feeling of sadness in the air. I'm not really looking forward to spending 5 hours in that environment, I must say. Choosing to look at things with an optimistic pragmatism is just so much harder when you're surrounded by negative vibes, so that's going to be very rough. Still, there was some good stuff that happened during the doctor's appointment, which, I got genuinely connected with a social worker, and she started me on some financial aid stuff, so that's hopefully going to make things cost less. Woo. And while it did take a while, I was made aware of some pretty cool benefits I get as pity gifts. For example, I get exemplary 1 free cancer massage. Don't ask me why it's just one or why it's free, but just know that I am taking it. Getting a massage at least once in my life, it's been on my bucket list for quite some time. So that was good and useful, and we'll have to see if that actually comes through as far as the aid goes. As soon as that finished, I drove home and hung with Jordan. We went to the Wade's for Foods, which was good, though I will say, not as good as it could have been, given the absence of the bacon pub. And then from there, they showed me their apartments, and with Braden, not the way. I got you. I drove home and hung out with Braden. We went to Wendy's for food. I see. And then he showed me his apartment and his rats. His apartment was nice, definitely nicer than his old place, but honestly, it seemed a bit expensive for the value. Let's be honest, I have no idea what's normal for renting as far as housing goes, but as for the rats, didn't dig them at first, but they kind of grew on me. Still, definitely not my first choice for a pet, but not the worst. I feel like ferrets are just better than rats. If you're going to get a rodent, go for a ferret, because at least it's original. Regardless of my thoughts regarding rats, there was a good part after that was a good part, which we took a long drive with Thompson Canyon, and it was lovely fall weather and had a bunch of very good conversations. We stopped at the airsoft spot and just sat on the rocks for a while, and that was really nice. And then Braden took me up on his UPS route, and we saw these pseudo backgrounds on these pseudo back roads, which were very fantastic, and he drove very fast. We also saw this beautiful sky gradient, and yeah, it was overall just a very nice time. Braden says there's this one spot up here where on the right day, when the clouds are low enough, the clouds actually freeze the pine trees, covering them in ice. And honestly, that sounds super cool. I would really like to see that someday. Once I got home, I was tired because I was up at 7. But sleep was not yet to be had as the family got together and discussed. And we decided it'd be best if I moved into Ben's room during chemo treatment. That way I would have my own bathroom and an actual quarantine area. But also because Ben will be moving out into his own house soon. Oh yeah, Ben bought a house. Thus we talked about that, and that took a bit. I then got a bit of anime with Grace watched, before hopping on a call with Liam and just figuring out how to get the old realm going again. I was also just super tired, so I then pieced out and slept. The next morning, I had a beautiful and peaceful quiet time, after which I had Fudume. From there, I stalled, because I had an awkward gap of time between my walk with Neo and Alan, with Neo's Alan, and talking about psychology stuff, because I can't remember all that from 3 years back. Then David, Johanna, Grace, and I met up for tennis over at Rollman Park, and that was all right. Johanna was really bad. She couldn't even hit the ball most of the time, but at least she tried. And to be fair, she got better as it went on, and we got a few good volleys in, but it was so-so as far as enjoyableness. From there, Johanna and Grace had to go, but David and I decided to stick around and play some more, and we just talked as we casually hit it back and forth. See, I don't know David all that well yet, but honestly, he's surprisingly open about stuff, and the conversation we had was fairly deep, so that was good. From there, I went home, and Dad ordered Boja's pizzas for all of us, so we ate that, and we watched Maze Runner. However, since I've seen it recently, I decided to leave partway through and talk with William about philosophy things that he's working on for the next hour. After that, I worked on this live email until about 10, at which point I realized that I would like to go on a night walk. So I invited Grace and we walked over to the city park together. It was a very nice walk, not necessarily for aesthetic reasons, because, I decided to go barefoot and there were so many little rocks on the road that you didn't even know were there before. But partially, it was just good to talk with Grace. I think we were out for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, not sure. But it was a fairly long walk and a good time. It was at this point I officially started the first fast I've ever done in my life. And it was a full water fast, too. But since I'd eaten mucho pizza just earlier that evening, I felt normal at this point, and I just went to blissfully to sleep. Since I often do intermittent fasting, e.g. 14, 16 hours or so without food, the start of the next morning I wasn't hungry until 3 hours or so after I woke up. Thus, I used that time to read more of my anthology of Bayes' theorem, because I was very confident there would be no way that I could focus on something that dry once I was hungry. Once I finished that, my stomach began to complain, so I decided to be wise to engage in thoroughgoing distractions. Hence, I went over to Neo's house and played Magic with him on a picnic table under the fall leaves over at CSU. A pretty, good environment to play Magic in, I must say. I think we played for 5 hours. It was a long time. Essentially, we just did tournament-style 1v1s where we started by randomly rolling for decks. I rolled Vanifar, which turned out to be really unfortunate because she lost first game. And then each game finished, the winner would keep their deck in play and the loser would switch to a new deck. So for most of the time, I did really poorly as Neo's Killian deck just wiped the floor with me. But then, when all hope seemed lost, I pulled out my Flash deck, which I thought was one of my worst decks, and it proceeded to win 6 games in a row. So it turns out, Flash creatures and counterspells are super good in a 1v1 game. Holy cow, the deck just destroyed. Eventually, Neo got so sick of losing, he gave up and decided to just let me have the victory. So yeah, with Neo thoroughly vexed and me robustly satisfied, we parted ways, and I went home. I then proceeded to show Grace a new anime to watch, did some little housekeeping things, and then went over to Morgan's new house for the first time, and she showed me her and her boyfriends. I showed her and her boyfriends, wow. Love is War. I think they both enjoyed it, and it's been quite a while since I watched it, so that was fun for me too. We then talked for a little bit about nothing super important, and then I headed back over to Neo's for some Halo until midnight, so that was the day. Now, I will say, while not eating and being hungry was annoying, it took a lot less willpower than I thought it would. Maybe it's because I'm used to running, where willpower is required to push yourself through, continual physical pain. But, fasting is fairly low on a list of hard things to do, at least in my opinion. Finally, as for yesterday, I went to church in the morning, still fasting, playing some Magic while everyone ate food, which was a touch painful. And then I went over to Neo and Sydney's house for typical D&D things. It was at this point, around the 44-hour mark, that I broke my fast and ate some cheese in a mug with chicken broth. I will say, that was really good cheese and chicken broth. Oh, right, I was testing, I remember. So yeah, we did D&D and it was okay. Sydney gave me an attempted bacon pub burger, which unfortunately fell short of the OG bacon pub burger, but it was still a good burger. And then we had a bunch of discussions about the commune John is trying to put together at some point in the future. And this time around, I expressed my concerns, but honestly, at the end of it, I realized it wasn't worth my time. John is pretty set on his idea of how to do things. But still, I gave it a shot. From there, I went home, planned a rollerblading excursion for the day, and then worked on this life email. I also discovered that Ben's room is non-trivially radioactive. Like, the room has such high levels of radon, it literally exceeded the tester. For reals, the radon measuring device goes up to 100. The level which is considered safe is like 4 and below. And his room reads 99.99, meaning it literally can't display how high the radon levels are in Ben's room. So it makes me think there might be a legit, like, uranium deposit below Ben's room, since radon is decayed uranium. So yeah, if anyone needs uranium for the next, like, nuke, I got you. But there you have it. We've come to the present where I attempt to enjoy my last few days pre-chemo, and where I spend my mornings writing life demos. Thanks to all of you that made it to this point, and yes, I know this life demo wasn't entertaining as some, but, you know, I got behind, and so I'm rushing through this. If you could send some prayers my way as I'm starting chemo, that would be well appreciated, and yeah, wish me luck.